In antebellum Kentucky, farmer Mr. Shelby runs on high debt, confronting the possibility of losing everything he owns. Despite his kind heart, he decides to sell two of his slaves, Uncle Tom and Harry, to a cruel slave trader, Mr. Haley. Uncle Tom is a middle-aged, humble Christian man, and Harry is the son of Eliza, Mrs. Shelby's maid. When discussing the trade deal with his wife, Mrs. Shelby, Eliza overhears the conversation and rushes to escape with Harry and warn Uncle Tom of his selling. Uncle Tom refuses to flee with her, so Eliza continues her escape in hopes of achieving freedom in Canada with her husband, George Harris, who is also in search of freedom. The following day, Mr. Haley arrives at the Shelbys to collect Uncle Tom and Harry, but learns that Eliza has run off with Harry. Mr. Haley sets off to pursue Eliza, but two of Shelby's slaves warn Eliza of Haley and his dangers. Eliza tremendously leaps over the icy Ohio River, bringing her and Harry to a Quaker settlement. The Quakers agree to aid in their escape, and they are joined happily when George is reunited with Eliza. Having lost Harry, Haley then hires Loker and his gang to hunt after Eliza and Harry. Meanwhile, Uncle Tom is taken on a boat with Haley, headed for the slave market. On the boat, Tom meets an angelic white little girl named Ava. Ava falls off the boat, and Uncle Tom heroically jumps in to save her. Grateful, Ava's father, Augustine St. Clair, purchases Uncle Tom from Haley. Tom is sent to St. Clair's mansion in New Orleans, where he develops a strong bond with Ava over their faithful Christianity. St. Clair discusses slavery with his cousin, Ophelia, who is against the Slave Institute but is prejudiced against the black race. On the other hand, St. Clair feels no prejudice against blacks but feels powerless to change the institute. He buys a young girl, Topsy, who had recently been abused by her master for Ophelia to educate. Back up north, George and Eliza continue their escape as Loker and his gang chase after them. George shoots Loker in the side and the other slave hunters retreat. Eliza insists to take Loker to the nearest Quaker settlement for aid in his health. After 2 years, little Ava starts to become deathly ill and dies with a vision of heaven before her. Her death profoundly affects the St. Clair household, softening them and resulting in St. Clair's decision to grant Uncle Tom his freedom. However, before he can act on his decision, he is stabbed in a dispute and killed, finally seeking God as he dies. With St. Clair dead, his despicable wife, Mary, sells Uncle Tom to a very inhumane Louisiana slave plantation owner, Simon Legree, the biggest antagonist of the novel. Tom meets another slave, Emmeline, being sold to Legree as his sex slave as a replacement for his previous sex slave, Cassie. When Legree orders Tom to whip another slave, Tom refuses, resulting in his beating and Legree's persistence to diminish his faith in God. Tom meets Cassie, hearing her story that her daughter was taken away from her and that she killed her other child when she was pregnant because she could not deal with another child being taken away from her. Tom's faith starts to dwindle as Legree continues to abuse him. He soon receives 2 visions, one of Christ and one of Ava, which help him regain his spiritual strength and shield him from Legree's beatings. He encourages Cassie and Emmeline to escape from the plantation, refusing to tell Legree where the 2 girls had escaped to. Legree orders 2 of his other slaves to beat Tom to death, and he forgives Legree as he dies. Back up north, Loker has changed his mindset and decides to help Eliza and George make their way to Canada, where they have achieved their freedom. On the boat during their escape, Cassie and Emmeline meet George Harris's sister, where Cassie learns that Eliza is her long-lost sister. The family travels to France, reunited, and decide to move to Liberia. Unfortunately too late, Shelby's son has come with money to Legree's plantation to purchase Tom back, but finds that Tom has already died a martyr. George Shelby returns home and frees all of his father's slaves in honor of Uncle Tom.